Assalamu alaikum. This is Brother Hameed back again with the Muslim Empowerment Institute. I've been keeping track of the funds that were raised by Muslims for the families of the Jewish victims of the mass shooting in a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When the Lunch Good fundraiser closed recently, the Muslim community raised over $238,000 through the website within 48 hours. This greatly surpassed the goal of $150,000. Even though the Lunch Good fundraiser was open to those of all faiths, it's safe to assume that the majority of the donors to the site were predominantly Muslims because, if I'm not mistaken, Lunch Good is a Muslim-oriented website. This is not to mention the GoFundMe campaign that so far has raised over $1 million that was initiated by an Iranian immigrant. Iran is a Muslim land last time I checked. So ironically, it's the Muslims who have contributed to the over $1 million raised to support the families of the Jewish victims. Now, by no means am I saying that this was a bad thing to do. If the people who gave had pure intentions, then inshallah they'll be rewarded. I mean, this was a terrible tragedy. Now, I'm sure we also remember another terrible tragedy that took place in a church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, where 9 black people were killed. Now, guess how much the Muslims raised for these 9 black folks? $724, and you can Google this and find out for yourself through the Lunch Good website if you don't believe me. Now, a couple of days before the Jewish shooting, 2 elderly black people were murdered by white supremacists in Kentucky. So far, they've raised about $50,000. Now, the question I want to delve into is, why does it seem that the Jewish victims of the mass shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania mean more to the immigrant Muslim community than the black victims of the mass shooting in Charleston, South Carolina? 9 black folks killed in the place of worship by white supremacists versus 11 Jewish folks killed in their place of worship by white supremacists. $724 for the blacks, $238,000 for the Jews, according to the Lunch Good website. Is it safe to say that the Immigrant Muslim Collective, as I like to call it, is more concerned with getting cool points from whites by donating to the Jewish victims in hopes of removing the different Islamophobia stigmas that the white power structure has perpetrated against them as a result of their endless journey of chasing whiteness, versus helping the black shooting victims, which they're not as concerned about? Is it that they ain't trying to help the black shooting victims because their black lives don't matter to them? That sounds familiar. Or is it a situation where no one really cares about some black shooting victims because they kill each other more than the white supremacists ever could? We've heard that before. Or is it if we help these black shooting victims, then that wouldn't do anything to improve the public opinion of Muslim immigrants in America? There's never been a collective of black Christians domestically or globally that oppress Muslims anywhere on the planet. No collective of black Christians has ever oppressed the Palestinians, for example. Yet seemingly the slain Jewish victims are more important than the slain black victims, according to the Immigrant Muslim Collective. And this includes those immigrants whose ancestors sued in order to be classified as white in America, which is well warranted. To the Immigrant Muslim Collective, I advise you to study the history of black people in America, especially those who fought for civil rights. If it wasn't for the efforts of people like Martin Luther King, whose efforts contributed to the abolishment of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which allowed many of you to flood into the country to study at prestigious universities in America and work for big companies, and allowing many of you to open convenience stores within the black community, you would still be back home, somewhere over the rainbow, empowering your own homelands with your knowledge, resources, and your wealth. And perhaps if you stayed there, maybe the Muslim world wouldn't be so messed up right now, as a result of the brightest and best minds from Egypt, India, Palestine, and the rest of them leaving their respective countries in order to make America great again. And then you could thank the Nation of Islam for making Islam mainstream in America. If the groundwork wasn't done already, I think you would have had even more of a difficult time of being Muslim in America. And to the black American Muslims out there who are trying to have a civil rights movement against the racism that exists from amongst some immigrant Muslims in America, to those of you who have been historically conditioned with inferiority from the forces of white supremacy, you've already caught hell from the white power structure. Don't take it again from anyone else, even your brothers and sisters in faith. You got immigrant Muslims out there calling you nigger or the different Arabic equivalents, and they got a lot of them. When in America, They're considered the new niggas. Now you know where they stand with the money that they raise for the Jewish shooting victims. You know where they stand and who they stand with the money that they raise for the black shooting victims. It's time for you black Muslims to stop playing second fiddle to the immigrant Muslim community. And this is just another reason to do so. You got immigrant Muslims raising money for the Jews, black Muslims raising money for immigrants, and ain't nobody raising money for the black man. Sad situation. You know what time it is. It's time for black Muslims to reclaim Islam from the immigrant Muslim collective. That's what time it is. Let this be a lesson and a reminder. Please comment, subscribe, and check out the MuslimEmpowermentInstitute.org website for publications and articles, and check out the Black Dawah Network on Facebook. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.